Hello, and welcome to episode 259 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast in all of the internet. My name's Jordan Willis.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on tonight's episode of the podcast. Welcome to the first time, Isaiah D. Colbert, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going, Isaiah?
Going pretty good. I'll be completely honest. I'm quite tired, but I am not tired enough to skip out on this. So this is very honored to be here.
We're going to pump you up.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking all about games journalism. Isaiah is a games journalist, so kind of give us some insights into that kind of world that we probably don't know much about ourselves. We know a little bit, but before we get into all that, we're going to go over the news. There's rumors that Microsoft is launching Call of Duty on Game Pass. We'll see what happens there. I don't know, question mark. Summer's Games Fest announced their partners and the kickoff event. We also got Vim's Lair DMCA drama, but we'll get all into that during the news section. Before we start on that, how's everyone doing today?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Had a nice time this weekend. I got a lot going on. I got a little stressed out. I'm about to do a move, but my sister came into town over the past few days, and we chilled for a little bit, and that was nice. And she helped me untangle the rat's nests of wires that I've taken from one apartment to another over pretty much the past decade. So that was actually incredibly helpful and something I probably would have never done on my own. So I got a lot of e-waste to take to the nearest e-waste receptacle. I don't know. Where do you take old USB cables that you don't need anymore?
Best Buy can take some of them.
I think it also might be worth looking into the Austin Recycling Center. It's kind of down south, and they take a lot of stuff like that.
No, that's too far. I'm just gonna chuck it into Trash Island in the Pacific.
All right, fair enough.
That counts.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I tried, guys, for about 2 seconds while we were recording. What about y'all? How are you doing?
I'll go next. I just got back from a trip to Seattle, Washington, gorgeous Seattle, Washington, where every time I go, I seem to get very lucky with the weather. Everyone's like, it's never like this. And every time I go, it's always like that. So I have a very good false narrative of Washington State in my head. But I love it out there, man. It's just beautiful. So lush, green. So we just checked out a couple different neighborhoods out there, visited some friends. And so I got back yesterday, flew out super early. Also, you lose 2 hours coming back as you go into the future. And today I've just been taking the day to kind of sleep in, recover, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, that's pretty much what I've been up to. What about y'all?
Working hard on cranking out levels for Monochrome Heights. That's what I'm doing. So
yeah, man, you got to be pretty close at this point. How many levels do you have done?
I'm really trying to build a draft of every level by the end of the month, and sort of a call to action here. If you're out there and you enjoyed the demo and you want to play test some new levels, I need some people to play test. I will definitely hit up people that are pointing at themselves right now, but I need more than two. So that's gonna be next month. I will be looking for that. So hit me up if you've got some availability for that. But yeah, otherwise I'm doing great. I don't think there's any exciting things to talk about right now.
I think that's very exciting, creating a Tough as Nails 2D platformer.
Yeah, well, it feels nice to get, because it's within sight to finish the levels. There's still a lot of work, but that's a big part of it. So Isaiah, how's your week been going?
My week, I guess mostly my weekend has been really busy. So I went to Anime Central, and first time being there, two, went there for work. So this is probably the second time I've been to an anime convention for work, and boy howdy, I feel I think there was an interview with Michael Jackson where he was talking about touring. He's like, I hate it. It's miserable. It's the worst thing. I'm like, can you speak it, give it some levity? He's like, I love touring. That's kind of me when it comes to going to anime events, because I'm just it gets really tiresome, especially when you have to think of it as a work mindset where you're right. I need to be here at this time. And it's like being at the airport, but there's a bunch of other things going on at the same time.
People with giant axes at the airport.
Yeah. There's big cosplay, people in like giant Pikachu outfits and stuff. But yeah, no, just got back from that. And I kind of took the day just to kind of recover and kind of in between projects. So while I'm not like gaming anything right now, I like just got off of the really like monumental high of playing this game called 1000X Resist. I highly recommend it. I went so far as to say it's probably the best game I've played in the last decade. Like, no kidding. It's its story goes in ways I didn't expect it to go. So like I wrote a piece about it on Inverse where I basically kind of compare it to like the spiritual successor of Nier, and more games are kind of doing that, but this game kind of like does the substance over the style. Stellar Blade. But so it's an interesting game. And so I spent most of my day not gaming, but I was just reading some manga. I did the thing I promised not to do, and I read ahead in Delicious in Dungeon because I'm like, this is too good now. I gotta just peek a little bit and see how things are going.
I still haven't started that yet.
It's pretty good. It goes places.
That's cool.
Last week we had an episode about the Super Switch, or the Switch successor, and all the known and unknown and rumors and leaks and all that stuff since they have officially announced the announcement. And we had Papa Gina's on for that episode, and that brought a lot of new commenters and subscribers. So thank you to everyone who commented and subscribed. I'll try to shout out some of y'all. Our friend Matt Hobby said, Summer, start playing the intro on accordion. And I actually really like this idea. But Summer's not here today. Leon Kennedy said, another great show. Hat Stack Mike said, I came here through being shared by Papaginos, and I'm enjoying listening to the discussion. You have a new subscriber. We got a few people who said stuff like that, including Monafied3305. We got Nux33JW, who similar sort of vibes, but also had a comment about, our discussion on Nintendo not taking advantage of the year as much as they could have. And we got a couple more people talking about Switch naming and what would be a good Switch name, as well as that person, including Divector8. So we got a lot of new faces over on the YouTube. So welcome to the show. Hope you stick around. Thank you so much for subscribing and checking out Super Switch Headz.
It was nice. Like we actually were on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. Our little talk with Papaginos got shared over there, which is I think what drove some of the traffic. So Isaiah, we'll just have you come up with some completely unsubstantiated rumors.
My cousin at Nintendo just texted me some beats.
All right, timestamp that shit. All right, we're going up, baby.
But we appreciate all our listeners and viewers, commenting, and we'll try to shout you out if you do. Leave a comment on the YouTube or send us a note somewhere online, like on social media, or come check out our Discord. We also have Patreon, and thanks to all our patrons over on Patreon. And make sure if you're watching on YouTube that you hit like and subscribe, join all these new subscribers. And even if you're not watching on YouTube, hop over to YouTube and hit like and subscribe for us. That'd help us out. And with that, we're going to get into the news and rumors for the week. We're going to start off with an NSO announcement. The Game Boy app has got a few new games now as of late last week, right? They have finally added Alleyway. That's what everybody wanted.
Gaming is saved.
The one thing that can make Breakout better is black and white, baby. That's what I really need.
So the three games are Alleyway, Baseball, and Super Mario Land, which is obviously sort of the big one that was missing, right from the app. I did actually have Baseball as a kid, so I haven't tried it on NSO. I don't know if I will. I'll probably be disappointed. I don't know.
Yeah, Baseball's a weird addition, but it makes sense when you think about it. Basically, Alleyway, Super Mario Land, and Baseball were the three launch games in the US for the Game Boy. I think Japan got another game. It was like maybe a Mahjong game or something, but that didn't release in the US. But I don't know if it was timed to an anniversary or something, but they just dropped the three launch games. It is still odd that they waited this long to drop Super Mario Land, but I'll take it. It's a great game, even though it's kind of pretty maligned and plays really weird in a modern sense. But yeah, it's great to see these games. Japan also got an extra game. They got The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. That's a really cool game made by a lot of the same people who did Link's Awakening, and it's done in kind of a very similar style. It's like a non-violent action RPG sort of thing. There are like English ROM hacks of that you can find online for that game, but sadly, Nintendo doesn't really fuck with those on their NSO service. But I really wish they would.
They're milking these releases to stay in the news, right? That's why they held back stuff like Super Mario Land, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah.
Next up, we're going to talk about Microsoft a little bit. There's been talk about, right, with Xbox closing good studios and all this stuff, that Game Pass is maybe not getting enough subscribers, or, and putting things on Game Pass isn't netting them money. So there's been a rumor lately that Call of Duty, I mean, there's been discussion about this for a long time, right? But within the last week, I think the Wall Street Journal is the publication here that said that Microsoft is going to make Call of Duty available on Game Pass starting day one.
The cynic in me is like, I mean, you make these games like once every year, so might as well just see what happens this time around, since like half the internet is like Microsoft copium, all they're washed, they're like not as good as they used to be type thing, and the other half is like the other side, the copium side, is like no, they still got it, they're still the kings. And it's just like this weird like arms race to the bottom almost between Sony and Microsoft to just see them make these decisions that don't really make sense. They're more short-term than long-term decisions. So I don't know. I'm one of those people that's like, I haven't played COD since Modern Warfare 3, the first one. So
yeah, same.
Yeah, none of us, I think, here play it, but it's a big game, right? So,
well, I feel like most people that play Call of Duty these days anyway play Warzone, right? Which is a free game. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, obviously they had to do something with the $70 billion purchase that they made, So I think, what else are you going to do if not put them on Game Pass to increase the value of Game Pass, right? But the question is this actually going to drive people to subscribe to Game Pass, Because I think at the end of the day, they're still pushing these games out on PlayStation platforms, right? So I think all the PlayStation COD fans are just going to buy it over there. And I think what all this is really feels like it might do is just make it to where people aren't going to make a $70 purchase that will go to Microsoft on their platform. You know what I mean? I think a lot of Microsoft fans that would be playing Call of Duty probably already have Game Pass, So I guess the question is like, how many people are actually going to subscribe and see the value in, especially if like all they play is Call of Duty, is it really going to be worth $15 a month to play Call of Duty? You obviously get other games as well, but I don't know. It's just, I'm very interested to see how this shakes out, if this is indeed true. I don't know if I don't think Microsoft has like confirmed this. This is from the Wall Street Journal, I think.
Right.
I feel like it really depends on how many people sign up just to get Call of Duty and then forget to unsubscribe for a year, because then they made more than $70 off of this one person, which I think is kind of the whole idea with the subscription models. I'm like trying to think of how many subscriptions I've had for way longer than I intended to. I feel like that's kind of the play they're going for, because at this point they're like, well, if we can't sell the hardware with the games, we might as well sell the streaming service just to supplement the income. But I think, they'll still make the PlayStation sales. I don't know. And I still think people will still buy it on PC, but I honestly, though, the big problem is they're going to have is if it doesn't work out this first year and then they want to take it away, they're just going to piss off like an entire section of gamers that are very annoying. Sorry, Call of Duty fans. But historically there are some bad apples in that crowd. But I don't know. I'm more curious about the fallout if they try to reverse that decision.
Yeah, that might also make people who already feel like they're basically leasing games more than owning them anyway. That might like kind of like expound upon that kind of feeling of loss, I guess, for a lot of gamers too, if that comes to pass.
Yeah. No one's really like a stand for entitlements, right?
Time will tell, and we'll talk about it more, I'm sure. But we'll move on for now into talking about sort of a follow-up to something we talked about a few weeks ago, which was that Take-Two had announced, or I think the news broke that they were going to close some development studios, including the developers of Ollie Ollie World and Kerbal Space Program 2. But strangely, in an interview with Rebecca Valentine on IGN, the CEO of Take-Two says that they aren't shuttering those, or they didn't shutter those studios, which seems in direct contradiction to things that Jason Schreier is sharing and tweeting about and stuff. So I don't know what the truth here is, but I think we'll find out soon. And I can't, it also sounds like, so as a follow-up question, they tried to be like, so you mean they're not shutting him? And somebody else, like the PR person, stepped in to answer that question with, and we're not gonna make any more comments or something like that. So a little suspicious.
Is it not shuttering a studio if you fire everybody who works there?
Yeah, right. It makes or just they're so out of touch they don't know who they're laying off, right? I don't know, or both. I don't know. Yeah.
Although completely realistic too, you know what I mean? It's like you can't expect the CEO of a major company to know
how many people
what companies they own.
Yeah,
Exactly. I don't know if there's some sort of loophole that is causing him to talk like this, or if he just needs media training, the CEO here. But either way, this is still very sad news.
Yeah, it doesn't I don't think this is reverse course, but we'll find out, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Doesn't look good. Ghost of Tsushima had its PC launch, and apparently it has been a pretty successful PC launch for PlayStation. It is the top-selling single-player game, or second to Helldivers 2, however you want to frame.
Oh, famous single-player game, Helldivers
2. So I don't know. There's a lot of controversy about the PlayStation accounts and regions and all of that, but obviously a lot of PC gamers have gone for it regardless, right? So I don't know. What any thoughts on that at all?
This is a game that passed me by. I am not a huge PlayStation gamer, but I am a Steam Deck owner. So whenever these games come to PC, I get pretty excited. From everything I'm seeing, at least the single player content runs well on Steam Deck, which has me pumped. Eventually, when there's a sale for this game, I don't think I'm going to buy it at full price. Especially because I know, at least on Steam Deck, the multiplayer content you just can't access because of anti-cheat stuff that is involved with PSN and their whole kind of system that they're using for that sort of thing. So that's kind of weird that, a lot of people buying this game just won't be able to play, a decent chunk of it. I don't think that most people buy this game for the multiplayer content. Most people buy it, because of the single player. And then I guess the only other thing is, like you said, there's lots of countries that just don't have access to this game on Steam because of the PSN integration, which is weird. I don't understand why PSN isn't in more countries. That's kind of surprising given their market share on a lot of the console market. But any of you guys play this game or are interested in this game?
I watched an LP of the game when it came out, but yeah, it seems like a pretty cool game. The cynic in me is because I've just had the misfortune of being on Twitter during the whole Assassin's Creed Yasuke thing. I'm just part of me is wondering is this going to be the new discourse of the week to be well, you see, this game does really well, and we're gonna screenshot this for later to bank our points here for this, and then that one guy with the I like Trigun, but I don't practice what it preaches guy will just be see, look. And it'll just be I'm just catastrophizing, how can this good thing become a bad thing? Totally. What they should do, if they really want this, if this game is really going to be the Stellar Blade flag for the anti-woke crowd, what Sony needs to do is do a day one patch, change the race of the main character, and just really piss off all the fanboys. That's what I would do if I were the head of Sony right now.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think I will eventually pick this up. I'm glad it's available outside of PlayStation. I think the only other game I'd wait for now is I guess Bloodborne, but I feel like this one passed a lot of people by too because it came out pretty much towards the end of the PS4 lifecycle, right before PS5 came out, but then PS5 wasn't accessible, and I just think it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I'm glad to see it getting new life because this did look like a game that is up my alley. Red Dead Redemption 2 was one of my favorite games, probably in ever. So this kind of looks to be scratching that same itch. I think the thing I really like, or I was taking away from this launch, is other single player games that they've launched have kind of been a little rocky. Like I'm thinking specifically of like The Last of Us Part 1, when it came out, was super buggy. So I think my main takeaway is I hope they're learning the lesson of doing a little bit more testing before pushing it out into the Steam ecosystem. And it seems like Sony's getting a little bit better at that. So
it seems
nice
like I think they did do better this. Everything I'm hearing is that this is a pretty decent port right from the jump. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The era of Summer Game Fest and messy summer announcements is upon us. And we're starting with a tweet here that Jeff Keighley put out with a picture of announcing all the partners for Summer Game Fest in all its messy gloriousness. So there's a lot of names on this picture. I don't know what qualifies as something officially being in Summer Game Fest other than, I guess, them allowing him to say so. I don't know. I
would say our podcast is a part of Summer Game Fest, which a lot of people don't know. Yeah.
Over on the Summer Game Fest website, there's a handful of specific, showcases and stuff. If you're curious, the sort of kickoff event is on June 7th. There's a Wholesome Direct, Latin American Games Showcase, a women-led games showcase, the Xbox Showcase, which I don't, and the PC Gaming Showcase. That's all that's up there now. That's I don't know, any thoughts on Summer Game Fest coming up, or the IGN Live event and all that stuff?
That's a lot of logos. That's it.
Yeah. Notably absent is Nintendo. They still are kind of swearing no fealty to any of these pop-up E3 likes that are happening in the wake of its untimely demise. So I think they're just going to do their own thing, which is probably for the best, probably smart. I don't know. The IGN Live thing actually sounds like a little interesting, and it's cheap as hell to go to. It's like a lot cheaper than E3. I'm sure it's not as big, anywhere nearly as big as E3, but I might see if I could try to make it out to LA during that time. I know my brother is having a baby shower for his soon-to-be new baby during that time. So I was like, hey, maybe that's an excuse to go out there. I did apply for a press badge for the IGN thing, and then I was like, oh, it's only like $25 for a day. Maybe I'll just go out there, have an excuse to go visit my brother, but we'll see.
Well, Splatoon 3 the support of it is kind of coming to a close. The final season that they are going to be, at least big time supporting, update, that sort of thing, is Sizzle Season 2024, which is going to also be starting very soon. They put out a trailer for that, which shows off a new sort of subway or train station, rather, stage, a new bow and a new Splatana, and then a hint at the newest Big Run event, which is going to have all 3 of the King Salmonids in it.
Oh, whoa.
So yeah, like at one time, and then the trailer ends with like this weird shot of a jelly in the desert. And I don't know, Splatoon is just so obtuse and vague with all their marketing materials that I'm like, is that a hint at something, or is that just a silly thing that they did? I don't know.
It kind of looks like, I'm watching the video right now, and it looks like the jelly is looking up at the sky. So maybe the next game will be in space.
Yeah, it does feel like a hint at the next game, but I don't know if or they're just like, let's end it with a jelly in the desert. I don't, you know what I mean? I could see it either way.
Fun fact: our podcast always ends with a jelly in the desert. But no, I mean, it definitely. I don't really have too much of a dog in like what they've added to this game right now for this update, but I am excited to see what the kind of final Splatfests will be as they like kind of end their support for the game, because that was actually a really hype part of Splatoon 2, I think, was like knowing that the outcome of the final Splatfest was going to be what the next game was going to be about, was put like so much more weight on it, and I like missed this last Splatfest entirely, and I feel kind of bad about it because I actually really enjoy Splatfest. So I'm just looking forward to like kind of as this game comes to a close and it's got the max number of weapons and sages that will be in the game, like revisiting it for the last like couple months or something while that's all going on. But I love Splatoon, man.
Me too. As a big Splatoon player, I also missed this last Splatfest. I had a busy weekend, but it did happen. This was the "What would you do at the end of the world?" Same old bucket list or save the day, and bucket list apparently won. So I guess nobody wants to stop the apocalypse, but that seems to be true in real life too. So
Trash Island.
yeah. David is just a dump in that electronics. But we'll move on from Splatoon to some like Mario ROM hack type stuff, like a new Mario 64 game has released. It's sort of like a Mario Maker for Mario 64. They call it Mario Builder 64. I guess they were afraid to call it Mario Maker 64.
They did make his character have red overalls and a yellow cap and shirt, though, so he is dressed like the titular maker.
That would have pushed Nintendo over the line, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. I mean, yeah, it's a ROM hack of Mario 64, so it takes all the assets from that game and then lets you rearrange them however you want. You can make levels. You can go to a website and download people's levels. It looks really cool, and I haven't fucked with it yet. I want to at some point. Yeah, I mean, it looks great, and I love that fans make this kind of stuff. I can't really see Nintendo going after something like this, to be honest. I would be very surprised. I just can't see them making a Mario game where you build 3D terrain and use X, Y, and Z axes to, you know what I mean? It's like Mario Maker kind of feels like the limit of like what they would allow people to do in like an official setting. I could be wrong on that. I mean, they've tried to do, I think the 64DD had a bunch of stuff where you could make stuff or whatever, and they have Game Builder and Garage or whatever, but I would be very surprised if this gets taken down. It's really cool though.
Yeah, as far as like whether there'd be an official 3D Mario Maker, I don't know. That's a tough, like, I'm with you, David, that it seems unlikely, but I also feel like it's the numbering could make them want to do it with Mario Maker 3. I don't know. But
like you just add a D at the end of that.
Yeah. But I don't know. This does look cool, and we'll keep our eye out for specific levels and stuff. Maybe, I don't know.
Totally.
Moving on, some more Nintendo news. This kind of just happened, so I actually don't know personally a whole lot about this, but apparently Nintendo has purchased Shiver Entertainment, which was formerly, or is, if it's still in the process here, part of Embracer Group. And Shiver was in part, or in large part, a porting company for, I think, multiple things, but stuff going to Switch, some of the big Switch games, like apparently Hogwarts Legacy and stuff like that, which was a big game for Nintendo Switch, like that shot up on the charts.
Yep.
Back in the day, Shiver Entertainment worked on the Scribblenauts games. But yeah, more recently, they've been a porting house. And yeah, they also did Mortal Kombat 1, which was a much maligned port, as was Hogwarts Legacy. They were both kind of made fun of quite a bit for they work technically, and I think they both sold pretty well, which makes sense as to why Nintendo would want them. I think it makes sense for them to have their own in-house porting studio now, if that is indeed what they're going to continue to do. But I think also, that maybe they just have been working on, Switch successor games and and maybe those ports were originally meant to be for a Switch successor if this console was originally supposed to be out a while ago, which a lot of people kind of have been speculating that, the release of this thing has been pushed back quite a bit. So, I'm not going to begrudge them too much on porting like a huge open world game like Hogwarts Legacy to the Switch and having it not be the prettiest thing in the world. I think if Nintendo saw enough in them to make the purchase, then that's a good sign. And also, fuck Embracer Group. I'm glad to see Nintendo just straight up buying the cattle from Embracer Group on this one. Anybody who can get off the Embracer train is in good hands, especially if they go to someone like Nintendo, who does not seem to shutter companies that often. Alpha Dream being one sad exception.
It's like I'm not rooting for Nintendo. I'm rooting against Embracer.
Yes, basically.
Right. Yeah. It's like I hate watching a sports game or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be really hesitant to celebrate any kind of acquisition these days, right?
That's true.
Anytime you see an acquisition, I just like get really nervous, right? But I just hate Embracer Group so much. So yeah.
And I know we have talked about, in this acquisition happy time and in this sort of crash that we're seeing, why hasn't Nintendo taken advantage of it? So maybe they are, right? We're seeing the first, or maybe the only, but one of them here.
This is also one of the few Western Nintendo studios now as well. There's not a ton of them, but there's a handful, and they've joined a very small club.
Yeah. It makes sense too if they're looking to port more games to the Switch, the Super Switch, to have your own in-house studio porting those games instead of having to hire someone. It's just easy.
Moving along to another sort of roller coastery news thing that happened this past week. So Vim's Lair, which is like an emulation website where you can obtain ROMs and things like that. Am I putting it correctly?
There's a ROM website.
They apparently received a DMCA notice, allegedly from Nintendo, and so they took down a bunch of games from their site. But it turns out that might have been, according to their website, it might have been the work of DMCA trolls. But regardless, they are going to keep the media offline. So what do you think about that?
I have never heard of a DMCA troll before, but I thought we peaked at insufferable internet losers.
Nope.
They keep
no
finding
bottom.
ways to surprise me, man. My goodness.
Yeah.
I don't think every Nintendo game was taken down from Vim's Lair either. A lot of them were like games that had Mario in the title. Right, because that's kind of what they tend to look for. It's like Pokemon games and Mario games were taken down. And actually, someone I follow on Twitter found that out because they searched for it was Drawn to Life. It was a game called Drawn to Life that had Marionette in the title. And that game was also taken down. So they just control F'd Mario and pulled every file that had Mario like in the title off their website. So it seemed like they were covering their butts, and they probably should. I think that, in the wake of the Delta emulator going up on iOS, I think a lot of people online were openly being like, oh, you want to download Pokemon games? Go to Vim's Lair. This is where you find all the games for your emulator on your Apple device, So I think what has been kind of like a open secret for a long time has been much less secretive recently. So I'm sure eyes are on that website, whether or not this was a legitimate takedown.
Well, we will see if they return that, but I'm guessing not based on that. Yeah, I think that's good analysis that they're probably going to no point.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you can find this stuff if you really look for it.
Well, just sort of our last bit of news here is that Paper Mario, the 1,000-Year Door, is releasing this week. And if I'm not mistaken, David, I think you pointed this out. It's releasing on a Thursday, right? So the last couple first-party Nintendo games or big exclusive games have come out on Thursday. So I'm all for that. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think Luigi's Mansion is also releasing on a Thursday.
Endless Ocean was.
Yeah.
Let's
hope this is a new trend, mostly just for our sake, so that we have a little more time.
Yeah, it gives us an extra day to play.
Game
Yeah.
before we talk about it. That's why I care. But anyway, I'm really excited about this game because my son and I enjoy Paper Mario together, and he's been getting excited about it and paper crafting stuff based off the trailer. So.
That's right. You shared some photos in the Discord of the dioramas your son made.
Yeah,
those look really
he's
nice.
like really studying the trailer, so it's been fun. It's
to have hyperfixations like that once again.
Yeah, it was funny too because we were like, I reminded him that it was coming out. He's like, I've got a lot of work to do. It's like, you don't
back in the mines.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, but okay. Like it is like I gotta make this, I gotta make that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, the reviews for the game aren't out yet. I think the embargo is tomorrow. We're recording this on Monday. I think it's on tomorrow, but I'm expecting they're going to be pretty good based on the previews. I don't know.
They didn't censor the noose, so they already have that going for them. The noose in the town square, so you can't call them on that.
The noose is there. There's still a very well endowed ghost on the cover of the game.
Yeah, they have put her kind of front and center still. So
yeah, way to go. We're back. We've never been more back.
Is back, baby.
Yeah. God, the woke mind virus is finally dead.
Oh boy. Okay, well, I think that is going to do it for our news section. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with Isaiah all about games and gaming journalism. We are back, and this week we are talking with Isaiah Colbert about gaming journalism. Thank you so much for joining us, Isaiah. Maybe first up, you could just introduce yourself and talk about your background in journalism and video games and that sort of.
Yeah, so my name is Isaiah Colbert. So my background in games journalism, it actually kind of started in I guess to give a bit of the spiel of the story. So how in high school they're always okay, you got to pick a job. This will be the thing that you do for the rest of your life. And this is going to be a new college application. I was I guess I like writing. So maybe literature or journalism. Journalism stuck. And so I always grew up watching machinima more specifically, and some of the Rooster Teeth stuff, things that don't exist anymore. So there's kind of a trend I'm noticing a little bit. So I grew up watching those, and I think it was watching Kale Anonymous on a machinima etc. being okay, so you can report on gamings in an entertaining way, and that can be a thing. I'm and games writing exists too. So it's okay, I can try to get it in here. So I graduate from Columbia College Chicago, and I happen to use the Indeed, well, not the Indeed app, the LinkedIn app, the other one. So I because the jobs people there are the college advisors are always okay, so what do you want to do? Because they're we're a big journalistic institution type of college. We can help you get into here. I'm games journalism. We don't know at all the trajectory to get into that. So I happened to DM this guy who worked at GameSpot, and it would just became hey, you were my alma mater, is there any opportunities here? It's oh yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that. And then that became hey, actually, can you apply for this right now? Became the thing that then tripped into the Kotaku hiring, and I'd always followed Patricia Hernandez, the then editor in chief's work. And I even used one of her examples of pieces talking about Life is Strange 2 is I want to write like this. And then they're oh, well, this could be my editor. And then that tripped into that. So it always felt like a weird, I don't know, a JoJo stand thing, a Hey Owl, where it's okay, well, things are just kind of lining up and things are kind of happening. So that's kind of how things got started. So my angle when I got into games journalism is that there's this new kind of field of thought in journalism at large called solutions journalism, where basically the thought process is there are a lot of problems in the world, and a lot of people always get inundated with here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong, to the point where you kind of feel everything's bad and there's not really a way out of the hole here. So solution journalism instead wants to look at things in a different perspective, not necessarily a glass half full, but more these are the problems, sure, but here are people who are working towards solutions. They might not be all-encompassing solutions, but they're at least showing that there are people who are working towards something. So that's always been the key frame of mind I'd like to go into with a lot of the work that I do. So I got a couple instances of being able to do that while I was at Kotaku. I was able to talk to Black voice actors in the space that were up and comers to be okay, well, how did you get into the position that you were in? What's kind of the stuff that's going on that's always the negative implications on being Black in this space and things like that. So highlighting voices like that, and highlighting just different people who usually don't get that kind of area in limelight unless it's kind of a throwaway kind of thing, just to say here is their moment to talk, here is kind of their platform to speak. So those are kind of the things I like to do. I like to say afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted kind of a thing. So
nice.
That's just kind of the framework I tend to think about when I go into journalism.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm curious about that more, especially you coming into the whole journalism space in total with kind of this is the angle that I would like to do this kind of work. Is that when you're working for a place Kotaku, is that something that you can bring up on like, these are the kinds of stories I would like to cover? Or is it kind of like a case by case, like, I just wanted to try and bring my personal spin to the work that's assigned to me, I guess would be my question about that.
Yeah. So what I kind of learned, like a lot of it was just me like kind of like getting a feel for things as I went, because like I started off as like a contributor at GameSpot, which a lot of that was just like basically like news of the day, like a press release comes out or like some news blast hits. So you just kind of like have to surmise that and like almost in like a as clinical in a way as possible. Like you can like throw in maybe a couple like jokes or references in there or whatever, but like that's just kind of the day to day, and that's like mostly the day to day. Other places like Kotaku and IGN too. Like a lot of the times though, there'll be moments where like I guess back in the heyday for me at Kotaku, it would be like you'd start at like the week to be like, okay, so like come with like whatever your beat is or whatever you've been like focusing on or playing. Just be like, okay, so these interesting things happened. Either I'd like just naturally kind of network my way into talking to people in the space to be like, hey, like I can try to interview these people to do X and Y thing to just kind of get at the heart of that. So that's mostly how things kind of worked out. I know from there, like I was able to like do a couple like profiles, which are things I really like to do when I was at Kotaku. So like I was able to talk to James Stephanie Sterling. And that was just the thing where everyone was like, are you really going to talk to them? And I was like, no, yeah, sure. Just like, cause it's just like became like things where it's like, okay, so we always like kind of hear like the whole influencer or like personality or like, I guess gaming pundit, I guess would be a more accurate description for that kind of thing that they do, where it just kind of like comes up and people always assume that there's always like an us and them thing where it's like half the time we're like always it's kind of like championing the same things. We just like the powers that be or whatever the confines that like we have kind of like are somewhat at odds at times. So there's just moments where like I'll like use that to be like, okay, so like let me like at least talk heart to heart with this person. And so a lot of the things that I like to do when I was there, whenever I'd pitch something, it would be like, okay, so like be like an interesting thing where like, okay, so the Yakuza games, people like the Yakuza games because they like the localization of the Yakuza games. And that's always become like a point of contention with like getting things accurate or like how much do you embellish things with that. So I was like, okay, so we have a contact at Sega. I can like, hey, email them and be like, hey, is there anyone at like Sega I could talk to be like, hey, how do you guys like localize your games? And that became a whole feature there where like I got to like ask these like pointed questions. It was actually about the like Yakuza Ishin games. That was even a more harder game for them to localize since there's like more historical things going on in play. They have like a whole glossary to like help the player keep track of things. So like things that like I guess strike me as like interesting things, I'd be like, okay, like I'm either like looking at a community and being like, okay, here's this kind of like the temperature check on like what the community is kind of feeling, or like things that kind of strike my mind as like no one's talking or thinking about this in this way. Like how can we like kind of get that conversation starting? So that's usually how like the pitches kind of thing work. And sometimes that folds into like industry facing things where there's like big report pieces that happen about just like how the inside like of like a development studio like actually is, as opposed to how it like kind of like fronts itself being like on social media and things like that. So like that's usually how things typically go.
I think that's really cool. What you said about, you know, the afflicted, and I wish I could say that as well as you just did. Or a little while ago. But I'm curious about like, are there a lot of opportunities for pieces like that? You know, I mean, Kotaku is known for that a little bit, or had been, or what, I don't know. You know, it's a changing landscape, I guess, is what I'm kind of getting at, and like. I think there's still a hunger for reading and hearing about that kind of stuff, but I assume it's a little harder. I don't know. Is that your experience, or am I wrong?
It's like, I guess particularly like just to speak on Kotaku now, things are a bit difficult just like in general over there. Kotaku under Geo Media, just because I guess to say Geo Media is kind of like treating a lot of the publications it owns as like a big garage sale to just be like, oh, we're letting go of these people, either laying off wise or selling the like brand, but get rid of the writers kind of thing. So it just becomes like kind of a looming thing of like, we don't know how long to keep the lights on, and the goalposts keep changing of we need X amount of views, but we don't have the people to write them.
It was Guidesgate, right?
People who are working on those interesting things have to then double track to like write X amount of things that like to kind of feed the beast of like SEO or whatever. So like a lot of those like, I guess more like thought-provoking things that are just like everyone kind of aggregating the same news blast that like the news of the day was or whatever kind of dies down a bit, because again, like doing those kinds of like features or interviews or profiles take a lot of time to do. Because you like besides scheduling, just becomes like either having the angle or the angle changing or evolving as you go through it. Like a lot of those things are like even like big reported pieces like need a lot of time to comb through, and like a lot of that just becomes like this idea that at least in GeoMedia's case, where they think that the readers don't care about industry facing things like layoffs or like about like just like acquisitions and things like that that people really do care about. They want to learn about like what's a guide for Call of Duty, or like what's a Madden thing, or like what's a patch notes thing. And a lot of these things are like, yeah, sure, people will care about them, but that's more like a flash in the pan kind of thing, where it's not going to keep anything going for a while, because things like an Overwatch patch are just like, that's going to be old news in like 2 weeks time. Right. So what's really the point of putting the energy into that when there's like a whole bunch of other ideas, a bunch of other like games dev studios, like different things are like trying to like make something that's like worth feeling or worth talking about. This kind of gets like blown over just for, I guess, cheap SEO tricks that aren't really working, because SEO stuff is kind of changing. So anyone who modeled things after that is kind of just getting like blindsided by like, oh, well, all of our things are down, so it must be the journalist's fault because they aren't writing the things that we told them to write. So it just becomes this weird thing where like the like bill gets passed to the people who are trying to fit within the framework of like whatever the higher ups want them to do, which usually means that whatever like feature reported thing that they really wanted to work on becomes a neat treat that you could do if you finish the work that's like the like grunt work first. So a lot of it's kind of dying down. Yeah. Unless you're places like Aftermath where you like start your own like worker owned company where you pretty much can do that free reign kind of blogging style thing of like the days of old, where you don't have to feel like subservient to, hey, you wrote this piece about this one company and maybe they did like some abuses of workers or whatever, but like the higher ups are like, hey, you can't talk bad about them. We're trying to get some ads on our space that like crank the whole page to a crawl so you can't even read the articles and you have to do a read more to get to the third paragraph of something. So it just becomes like a conflict of interest where it feels like games journalism, which in some circles is just seen as blogging, it's more seen as like service pieces rather than actual journalism for like the space. So there's just that conflict of interest that happens a lot.
I think what you talked about with like sort of a race to SEO is really kind of interesting, because it's like, isn't that sort of what a lot of is driving this, right? Like write a short blurb about this press release so that maybe we can be the site that is the first Google hit when people search this, right? And it, but I don't think, like, to your point, that creates loyalty or anything, right?
Yeah, no, and like there's other things too. Like this is like kind of like irked me as like being one very like brand new like industry baby to the space and being like, okay, so this is how it works. Where like I noticed like at least in my own head, like whenever like indie game quote unquote comes out, and there'd always be a headline to be like, this indie game is like X game mixed that XY game. I'm like, wouldn't it kind of like be reductive to just kind of compare like a new game to another game all the time? Then that just becomes the other argument of like, well, people don't know the name of this game, so you need to grab their eyes with a bigger fish and try to treat the other game like kind of like the feeder fish onto that. So there's like certain tricks that like make sense, but there's other ones where it just kind of feels like it's a bit hackneyed, but it's just kind of the way of the beast, I guess. So
yeah, totally. I think it's more important now than ever in this industry to highlight the people that make games and the people that make these kinds of decisions, especially as we're in this really kind of dark period in the AAA game space right now. And I think that it's sad to see a lot of institutions kind of kowtowing to, here is the stuff that's going to hit big from these big AAA games that are the reason that all these people are losing their jobs. And it's like having these kinds of profiles on not only the people that, you know, the people that are cogs in these big machines, but that are also artists in their own right. I think that's super important. And then also the voices of indie game developers that are like, I feel like that's like the heart and soul of like the gaming industry right now, you know, and like seeing a lot of the creativity there. I don't know that this is really a question. This is just me talking, but it's like, you know, I just love to see that kind of journalism out of like the game space right now. And so it's like, I see a lot of that coming out of IGN right now. I think there's a lot of like investigative journalism that's been kind of on the up and up recently. I don't think it's all just SEO chasing. It's like, I've been seeing, obviously Jason Schreier's been leading that beat for so long. And then, we talked earlier about what Reb Valentine has been doing great investigative stuff, Kat Bailey over at IGN. And I think that kind of stuff now is also really important as these big CEOs of these multi-conglomerates or whatever, like need to have their feet put to the fire. And I think that kind of work is really important too.
Yeah, no. And like the notion that like, I think the like notion that like the like big owners, publishers of whatever of like these journalistic institutions that like say like, though the reader, like the average reader doesn't care about these things, like have to tie it back to gaming. Like, oh, what does this mean for gaming? Like, oh, well, these studios got shut down. So it's not the fact that these studios got shut down and these people are out of work very suddenly. It's like, you won't get this game anymore, maybe. And like, that's always like a weird way to like frame a thing, I think, like personally. So it's always like this weird like way of like, well, if you do write about it, you have to tie it back to, oh, does this mean that GTA gets delayed, or does this mean this way? Like, you're gonna get those games regardless, kind of a thing. It's like always like to see like how like studios like the people that made Hi-Fi Rush, like this game was really successful, and usually the thought is if a studio shuts down, it must not have been successful. And it's like, okay, so this doesn't like that circumstance doesn't like mean anything now. Like people could just like get shut down for successes, like layoffs that happen at like Naughty Dog and like so on and so forth. So it just becomes this thing where like gamers do at least care to like know the ins and outs. Like I think the thing that like those owners don't realize is that gamers really do like to know like the ins and outs of things. That's why we have like different modding communities or like different like speedrunners who are just like trying to find a way to like this the know the intricacies of something, and that like extends to like the people who make games too. Like, oh well, this developer that I like is kind of like this other developer. These people move from these other places. Like, oh, here's what their inspirations were. Like, people care about like just knowing like kind of those like intricate details of things. So like the notion that like, well, they won't care as long as they know where to go for the like get the link to the Amazon, like place the wish list things or pre-order things is like a weird like way to like, it's definitely like talking down to a reader too, because like, well, your intelligence wouldn't care about industry facing things. So
yeah, I mean there's so much discussion on message boards, right, about industry stuff where people are breaking it down. That they would want to I think that's like the same problem in a lot of creative spaces, right, where like the people, these companies, right, at the top and stuff are kind of putting the squeeze, and then you're forced to go out and make your own YouTube channel if you want to do your own independent journalism or something, right? But then how do you get seen? And I don't know, I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm curious about your take on that, sort of the like YouTube or like sort of indie, or I don't know what the right word is, freelance, starting your own podcast, your own whatever, versus traditional journalism. Because I think traditional journalism has something that's kind of what we're talking about that some of those things don't have, but I don't know.
Degrees.
Yeah. Objectivity. I don't know.
It always seems to become a thing too, where it's like, well, like there's always a thing where like people always say game journalists with like air quotes, and it just becomes a thing where like there's like definitely a difference, like not to like, because I think that there are like definitely like good like quote unquote influencers that do like good research pieces and things like that. There's just like, I guess the like asterisk for that would just be like the application of that, because sometimes there's just like not like decorum or whatever, it's just like a way to go about things, like just say like, oh, AP cell, whatever. But it's just like there's just like different ways to like research things and like how to like use language for things. Because a lot of the times like we get kind of loose with language. We're like, oh yeah, this got docs, or this got leaked, or XYZ, or like NDA kind of stuff, where it's like most like gaming NDA, it's just like, hey, we give you a code, but here's a contract to sign it, and like you don't have to sign it. They already gave you the code. So like there's like this other like, thing that just, it gets implied. There's like a lot of language that like flosses itself up to be like a big professional thing, but it's just kind of like perpetrating kind of to be that. So
sure,
I do think that there's a lot of good work that happens with a lot of like independent people. And so like when I see like people that like make their own companies, like Aftermath, or like have their own Substacks or have their own like independent thing, like a Game File with Stephen Totilo, like a lot of that for me, like I really appreciate that in the space, because it just kind of like brings back the kind of like gaming journalism that like I kind of came into the space for, where they don't have to like play kowtow to things, but in my head, like it takes a lot of like, I guess in a way to think it like to gamify, like it takes a lot of steps to get to that point in my head where it's like, well, you have to have X and Y Z years to at least get recognition enough to like be able to email X and Y Z like developer like personality to be able to get that kind of like access. So while like influencers
or to have people donate
have
money,
to, like, vibe,
Yeah.
yeah, to get people to donate to like help your like worker like owned thing, like that takes a lot of just like you have to kind of have like this like varsity jacket of like journalism to like be able to kind of play that kind of game. So a lot of people will either just do Substacks to help like I guess subsidize the work that they do to go into those things. But me at this point, it just kind of feels like I was still very much at the beginning of that journey. Like I definitely like made some very fast connections with people, but it just became like I was only like 3 years young into the game before my layoff. And then it's like, okay, so right now I'm kind of freelancing at different places that I like made connections with people there to be like, okay, so I'm mostly doing stuff at IGN. I do things here and there for Inverse and do things here and there for the Anime News Network and like kind of features wherever I can like get a pitch accepted kind of thing. So a lot of it just kind of becomes like what I'm learning now is at least like how much time I can put into a thing. And if I really want to do a thing, that's definitely going to be a feature. But for the most part, it's going to be like doing kind of the same like thing I mentioned earlier, where it's like, hey, a news blast thing happened, like a Deadpool detail happened or a casting detail happened here, like some game announcements or trailer thing happened here, like kind of just have to get into like kind of a routine of like getting like I guess warmed up to in my head how I gamify, like get warmed up to do like enough practice with these things so that I can be like kind of like back in that space to be like, okay, so now I'm like refamiliarize myself with how the space is moving, what's something that I'm like noticing or wanting to do with this bigger thing for that will, one, help me keep the lights on rent wise, and two, just like feels creatively fulfilling. Cause that's also the thing that like I found has been hard to keep in track of, especially after the layoff, where it's just like, if I want to write something and I'm putting time into it, I'd rather like have like not this feeling of like malaise or like, well, I wrote something, but it's just kind of like a drop in the water, like a bucket kind of thing. Like I want to like write something that like really like gets you like feeling about something, like has pros in it that like, oh yeah, that's a really cool thing that you thought about, or like something that like a big idea thing. So those are always like, I guess few and far between, and you also have to have the time to re-immerse yourself into things and not think like with a blog brain to be like, well, I got to get something out. It's like, no, just re-immerse yourself with something, let inspiration hit you kind of a thing. Don't force it. So that's something I've been kind of wrestling with. I've got a couple features in the works because of it. So we'll make it through this month of rent. We'll see what next month goes. But yeah, that's always this kind of the thing where like you just kind of have to remember that like even though you're like doing it because you want to do it, you're also doing it to service the reader as well. So that's other things you have to kind of like juggle and weigh.
I really like hearing that as someone who was on a TV show for a few seasons and am kind of in a limbo of if it's coming back or not. So just to know it's like, okay, how do I push through this weird period and kind of try to use the free time in a way that is going to like push my space and my artistic expression in the way that I want it to go. But I had like a really just kind of side question, like, do you have health insurance right now? Like, how does that work?
Oh, I don't. It was so nice when I worked there because I was like, wow, health insurance for the first time, crazy. And like the funny thing with all that, like I had to like get like 3 of my 4 wisdom teeth removed like the week before we went on strike. So I was like, oh, okay, we're in it now. So it's just like it's like a weird thing because like it's nice to have assurances like those, you know, just
man.
to be like, yeah, I'm allowed to make it through another month kind of thing. So yeah, like that's definitely the part that like kind of sucks tertiary wise, but it's just like, I don't know, things like in your head add up when you freelance too, because you like think about like, okay, so this is going to net me this much money for the rate for this thing. So I have to write this amount of things a day to make X amount of money. And then it's like, okay, so what's that versus a feature? Okay, if you do like 4 or 5 features, you'd probably be golden, but you'd have to be inspired enough to write something that's worth that time and gets accepted at X and YZ place that would pay that kind of rate. So like it gets very like it becomes a crushing rat race when you think about it too hard. But sometimes when like at least you have enough momentum to be like, okay, so like honestly, like there became a point where I was like, I know that games reviews pay a lot more, But after my layoff, I was like, I kind of have a weird spot relationship with games now because my life for like 3 straight years was just like, I have to play this game, even though one, I might have had a lot of time to like sit down and review the game and like play it in a timely manner. Would just be more on my time to play it and get a thing out really quick, deal with the Kotaku derangement syndrome, which is just getting like harassment for writing a thing about a thing. So then it just becomes like a thing where like, oh, there's an accomplishment here of doing it. But then it's like, well, now it doesn't feel good that I did it. So getting over all that and just having that feeling of like, well, I'd rather write about entertainment movie stuff since that hasn't been something that's like been such a vitriolic thing. So for a while, I was like, I don't really want to review games anymore. And then I was like, happened like this year's been fortunate because even like with my layoff happening, I've started to play games that like kind of in a weird way tie into my situation. I wrote a thing for IGN where I was like, okay, so the new Yakuza game has a character who's like, my life is doing really great right now. I got a job and everything. I'm doing all this stuff. You got laid off. Like, oh, wow, we're doing this. You're doing this to me now. It's like, yeah, you got to do that. And everything's super expensive in America. And you got to like you got to freelance. The job literally says like, oh, you have become a freelancer. And I'm like, oh, cool, great, awesome. This is great for me.
Escapism.
And so like being able to like write about that in a way that's like, okay, so like my experience can tie to this thing. And like, even though like some people are like, oh, you're just whining about this and making this about you. I'm like, I mean, it's a commentary piece. So by virtue of that, it's going to be that. So there's like moments like that where like games like have found a way to like kind of tie into that experience that like I appreciate more. Like even like indie games like I'm gonna keep shilling this one because I really like this game a lot. It's probably game of the year. 1000 X Resist, where like again it like has this near kind of feel to it, but a lot of it's just like stripped down. It's like it's about language and identity and like what is your place in this world when you are a copy of a copy of a copy, that you treat the original source as like a deity, that maybe that deity isn't as like benevolent as you like once thought, kind of thing. So like it like gets to like the point where like, okay, so now that I'm like not really trying to like play games, just be like, okay, I got to get this new game to play it and just like be with everyone else to have thoughts about it. It's like has like allowed me some time to just think like, what are the games that are speaking to me and like what am I getting out of this and like how can I like write about that in like a cool angled way to like get other people thinking about stuff. So that's just kind of been the thing that I've been trying to keep like as what I do when it comes to games, because I honestly don't like miss the whole embargo thing where like you have to hit an X amount of hours on either your own time or on a work time thing to then get all your assets into a thing, hit all the points about a thing and be like, oh, is it good? Is it bad? What's your number score? Like maybe things don't need a number score. Maybe I just kind of like it despite its faults or like it because of its faults, kind of a thing. So it's been like a thing I learn as I go.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's several things I would like to ask you about that you just kind of referenced, but just since you just mentioned it, number scores. I kind of hate number scores. I mean, I guess they're useful on some level, but yeah, when you're writing something, sometimes it's like, or you know, as a writing a review, like I would imagine it's sometimes you just, I don't want to have, you know, like it doesn't fit or whatever. And I know some places do things like pros and cons and stuff like that. Do you have, when you're in, have you been forced to give numbers?
Like, I did my first big review for IGN was like an anime review for Kaiju number 8. And like, I was like, oh yeah, I have to do like a number score for this. Like after I'd like done the review. Cause like one, it was kind of hard cause it was just the premiere episode. So I'm like, well, I kind of got to base off of the premiere, which isn't like the whole picture. I am the kind of person that would rather review the thing once it's out. So I can get like my whole thoughts there as to be like, well, here's a like wine tasting of what this could be like, but I don't know what the whole meal is going to be. And taking that into consideration with like, oh, well, I've also like caught up on the manga. So like, I kind of already know where the thing is going to go eventually, kind of thing. So like, it becomes this thing where like IGN, like at least when like in the back end, and I know that they have like a link where they show like, here's what the actual review score means, where like a 7 means like, it's good. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's terrible. It doesn't mean you get to see. It's like, no, it's good. 8's like, oh, it's amazing or whatever. It's like, there's like words there that like help you like kind of guide that. And like, I know before when I was at Kotaku, I was like, I kind of don't like the idea of number scores or review scores and whatever. I get that it's like useful for someone like at a glance to be like, hey, the Garfield movie got a 4. I guess it wasn't great or whatever. But then there's also that weird thing where like maybe someone who reviewed it doesn't like a thing, but then other people at the publication like maybe like kind of like the thing. So then there's become this weird thing where people assume that any publication is a monolith where like you gave this like this baby game got like a 9, but God Hand got like a 6. What is that about? Or something like that. So there's always like is this you kind of like meme thing that happens with that. But I think like places like Anime News Network, where I've done a couple of things for them where like they do reviews where it's like, okay, so you're grading it on like an animation versus art versus like music, things like that. And then you're like giving it like different like like school standardized scores, things like that. And you give it like plus or minuses. Like that at least feels like it's more of a conversation rather than here is the edict. It's always going to be this. You're never going to change your mind on this. Like, I think that's also the things I kind of don't like about review scores, because you can never like, once you put the score out there, it's like you can almost never change your mind on it unless they do like a retrospective review on it. So I like the idea that like just because something like is like a 6 or a 7 doesn't mean that you don't enjoy it, because there's games that aren't good that I'll still like preach by. Like, people don't like Resident Evil 6. I love Resident Evil 6. It's a blast. It's a blast, especially when you play with other people. It's silly, it's camp, and it knows it. It's definitely not the experience that the rest of the games are, but I appreciate it for the weird like mess that it was kind of a thing.
Resident Evil 6 out of 10.
Just real quickly, the internet and like the gig economy have ruined review scores, because like, you know, they've made it where like if you don't get 5-star reviews, you don't get recommended and stuff like that. And so like, and you know what I mean? And like, so it kind of becomes meaningless. Anyway.
Oh no, then there's people who are like, well, you gave this game a 4 or a 5, or you gave this game a 7, so now they're going to shutter the studio. Like, that's not how that works. Like, just because someone says like, I didn't like the game as much as the other publications did, doesn't mean that reviewer, like the owners are like, oh, these guys didn't like they're not paying attention to that. They're paying attention to like shareholders and like earnings or whatever. That's different beasts. Some people see it as art, some people see it as a business, and I like to think that reviewers see it more as art. So
yeah, you'd hope so. I mean, I think I feel like the review score can almost be like a scarlet letter, but like for like the reviewer, you know, I just feel like so many people have their minds made up on what they want something to be or whatever. And so then it comes out, and then that's associated, like you said, monolithically with the entire organization, where so often it should be. I mean, it's obvious. This just comes, I'll just say, I kind of like review scores personally. I find them fun. I like it for the drama. I like review scores for the same reason that I like award season. You know what I mean? Like come like the Oscars or the Golden Globes. Like, I suck that shit up. You know, I love that kind of stuff just because I find it fun. But I also like to think that I'm pretty media literate, right? And it's like understanding that like, this is one person's opinion or a voting block or whatever, you know, it's like anyone can enjoy anything for any particular reason. And so, you know, I think having a review score for me isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, you have to know what is loaded with that, right? But you just can't rely on that with a lot of people, I think, in the world, which is a little disappointing.
Yeah, you actually have to, you know, like read the review to understand why the score was there.
Most people don't get past the headline. Yeah,
that's crazy, because it's like similarly, like I will watch a movie I know is bad, or I'll play a game that I know just because I'm like, okay, but why? And try to understand it. And that's why I like, you know, reading a review, even if it has a, you know, a number that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this game. At least just being able to like parse out, okay, why was it given this? But most people just jump straight to it. I mean, just see like any Kotaku Facebook comment section is just like pretty rough, dude. Just to even just try to go through, you're like, dude, this is, I guess, the larger community that I'm a part of. Do I even want to play games anymore?
Well, no, and that's why when you said you were like, you really enjoy doing movies and like TV shows and entertainment stuff just to kind of break it up, I could totally see that, you know, because, you know, I work in film and I'm a filmmaker, and I've got these kind of two loves, you know. I love you know, I really just love entertainment, right? But it's like gaming is such a younger, it really does feel like it's such a younger like fan base, just in that movies have been being made for like 140 years now or whatever, right? And so it's like we've had time, and like the entertainment rags like Variety and Hollywood Reporter and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, you don't see the same kind of vitriol in comment sections on stuff like that, because it's like people have like learned what this kind of media analysis has just been a part of the bigger culture for longer. And so I do not blame you for wanting to take breaks from the gaming community every once in a while.
Yeah, no, because there become times where like I'd be like, okay, so I like video games, I like movies, I like anime, and I like wrestling, and I was like, okay, so like which thing am I going to use for like to like, weren't like earn to keep kind of thing, like to make money off of. And I'm like, okay, so video games is kind of a thing I can like kind of sacrifice to do that. So I can like see that as kind of a work brain thing. And then it becomes times like, okay, so like wrestling's kind of popping off now. I've got like an encyclopedia come out of knowledge about this. So like, let's talk about this for a second, but it'd be like not forever because I still want to enjoy that on a personal level.
Right.
So there'd be times where I like have to trade those things off to be like, okay, so which thing am I going to have to think about in a like work sense, or which thing do I have to like, can I still enjoy as kind of just the hobby side of things?
Do you think you would have enjoyed this 1000X game quite as much if you had to review it?
Probably. Like, I feel like I would have, but it would have been a thing where like, I know that the game's like around like 15 and a half hours is kind of like what I clocked out on it on. That would have been like maybe me. Because like me, like even like writing the thing that I wrote about it for was like, oh, I happened to see a tweet from like the director who's like, oh yeah, our game is kind of like near me. Like there was like the whole Twitter meme was like, oh yeah, your thing is like these three things. It was like, okay, it's kind of like near and it's kind of like in the mood for love and it's like Millennium Actress. Like, oh, you just named like three of my favorite things. Like that's cool. Like I'm interested now. Like, oh, I played the demo. Like excited to see how that goes. And it just became like a, hey, you want a code? Like, oh yeah, sure. It's like, okay, I played it for a bit, like at my own leisure to be like, okay, so like playing it, like moving away from when I'm feel like, okay, I'm a little like, I'm reaching max capacity for like my hours of playing this thing and the ideas are getting a little too big for me. Let me take some time away. Like if I hadn't have had that time, I wouldn't have had that time to like kind of like gestate ideas about it in a way that would have felt like thoughtful or like in a way that wasn't like I'm up at night and like, oh, well, now I need to get this review out. It needs to be X amount of words. It needs to do all this and that. And then it just became like a angled thing to just be like more pointed to be like, this isn't a full review, but this is as close to a review that I could have written. So I feel like it would have been like a bit of a half and half thing where like it definitely would have been like rewarding to say like, oh, I had like a review thing and like maybe got put in an accolades trailer or whatever the fuck. Like that it could be like a neat thing that goes along with it. But I feel like the like kind of like meat grinder thing that happens with those kinds of things like kind of take the joy out of it sometimes when you have like a set deadline to be like, well, everything gets out here. If you're late to it, you're late to it. And there's a lot of things that goes with that. So being able to take it at my own pace is always preferred. So
I'm curious about, the dynamics of writing for, TV, anime, film versus games. I know a lot of websites cover both. Is it sort of the same, like in terms of opportunity, pay, channels, or is there any noticeable difference?
So what I've noticed because I've kind of like was the main anime guy at Kotaku and like becoming one of the main like freelancer anime people at IGN. Like what I noticed is that like there's definitely more of a demand for like those kinds of publications to like expand into those areas of pop culture, but they kind of don't tend to have people who either have the experience with the thing and also like the quote unquote writing capability to like kind of address or like write around or like fit like how their like kind of their style guide works for those kinds of things. So like what I've noticed is that like for me, like it's definitely helped because like I grew up pretty much poor and like I'd have to like rely on like LPs to like get a lot of the gaming knowledge that I have like up until this point before I like was able to afford like the current gen consoles to play things. So like it always became like I'd have to rely back on that to like fill in the gaps of things that I've like not played. Like I've never played a Mario game or I've never played a Zelda game. Like I'd have to like rely on LPs I've watched from people to like kind of get that knowledge filled in there. But like with anime, it just becomes a thing where like, oh, so it becomes more of like you become like, that becomes like the beat, at least specifically for me, where it's like, I'd get asked things where like at Kotaku would just be like, I would do a thing where I do like a like seasonal guide, which I didn't really like doing partially because it was the thing that took forever to do. Cause it would be like, here's every anime that's coming out this season, which could be upwards like 47 things, but then it'd have to be a slideshow, which takes forever to build. And then I'd like have to like, I do a thing to make it kind of fun where I summarize it in a sentence so I don't have to stay here forever. So I can like have a little bit of fun with it with like, oh, there's the next isekai thing. That's like the fifth thing that I wrote about here kind of thing. So like it becomes a bit fun to become like the quote unquote expert in the space about it. But a lot of it also like, I guess becomes like, it was a really hard sell when I was at Kotaku starting out where it'd be like, okay, there's this anime thing coming out. I want to talk about this. And it becomes like we don't know whether our readership is into that, but otaku's in the name, you kind of assume that kind of be a given or whatever.
Gaming and anime.
It was always a harder sell to get that started, but I know definitely like things at IGN are a lot different because a lot of it just becomes like, instead of like kind of doing a widespread like kind of shot at things where I'd occasionally write like a feature like I did at Kotaku where like, oh yeah, the Fragrant anime is really cool. I'd rather talk about things that are like, I feel like are standouts rather than here's everything that's happening all at once. Here's a movie announcement. I'd rather say like, hey, this thing came out and it made me feel things. Let's talk about it kind of thing. So IGN, from my experience there so far, has been like, okay, so looking at the seasons, instead of it being like, here's a whole sweeping review, like they'll do their things on their side where they're like, here's like everything that's like kind of worth watching. And they'll like kind of ask me like, okay, so out of all these things are out, what do you think is going to be like a kind of a hit? So that kind of like lets me think in my mind and like look at different like communities, be there on like Twitter or Reddit to be like, okay, so people are kind of feeling this way about this thing. So like, I'll be like, okay, so people definitely care about My Hero this season. They care about like maybe Kaiju number 8. That's kind of the Black Horse thing. It's kind of the next big thing since it was a big like Shonen Jump manga. And then it'd be like, okay, so people care about Demon Slayer. I don't really care about Demon Slayer, but that's fine. And then there'd be like, okay, so people care about these things. And I'd like kind of keep a finger on the pulse there and kind of see like what's happening with each episode. And because I read the manga, I kind of have like I could peer into the future, be like, okay, so this is about to happen. So I can see what people are going to go for talking about these things. So it becomes like a cool like thing of like, I guess this is how people who like games and have that kind of age like seasonal thing with games feel when they like have like they played X and YZ game to kind of see in the industry for a while, where like it's becoming like a newer thing in the space where like you're able to kind of see that thing like where the tides are moving as well. Pitching wise, it's always an uphill thing. You'd always have to either kowtow it to like the big 3 anime or some big shonen thing, even though sometimes it maybe isn't fulfilling. Maybe you want to talk about a shoujo or you want to talk about like a slice of life thing. So it always becomes playing to the audience, but also like if something's unique enough, you have to really like plead your case for it. And like why like your voice, your like style, your like kind of angle is like kind of worth the time to like invest into it. So yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone who might be trying to get into games journalism or like just even freelance journalism in general? Like, do you have any pieces of pearls of wisdom that you might be able to give anyone?
My first like non-answer would be to check out our Aftermath's like FAQ about games journalism, because they're like, again, like I kind of mentioned earlier, they're kind of the varsity jacket game journalists guys that I like kind of trust with getting that better. Because like I feel like my trajectory in it was like, while there's definitely like work that went into it, it was always like it felt like kind of like a once in a billion kind of thing to have happened to play it out the way that it did. I know that it definitely helps to like one like follow like a lot of like just the different publications and just kind of like it helps to one just read like what other people are doing, what are they writing, and like who's writing what kind of thing, and to like not only just do that, but then to like it always also helps to like when you want to get into a thing, don't just like get into it to be like, hey, I want to like get a job, are you hiring kind of thing, because that just probably will begin and end at that like inquiry there. But maybe to do a thing where like, hey, you had an idea for this thing, like maybe you're like big into Dead by Daylight or something like that, and you like you notice that like a lot of places aren't talking about this or this new thing or this update or this like community thing that's been going on. So like I know a lot of places are looking for more community reporting, so it could be cool to like if you have a certain community that's either like kind of niche but has like this like kind of like specific thing about this like really interesting that like you have like this like perspective on that could like help like bolster a site just with your coverage over it, like that would be a cool thing. I know that a lot of people like also in general, if you're like wanting to kind of like jetpack your way into those things, that there are also like some demands for like people to do guide work. So if you like know like a lot of the stuff like with bigger games like say a Fortnite or thing or whatever, like pitch things there for like events, because I know that a lot of the times like some of the writers on staff that will have to allocate to do that maybe won't have time to do that. So it like mostly freelancing helps fill the gaps for things that like on staff writers don't have that time for and necessarily wouldn't notice. So try to think outside of the box with pitches, do community reporting on things, maybe like find some angle with that feels like specific and like something that's like, I kind of said it again before, but like something that like other sites aren't talking about, and you're like looking at like and researching and like paying attention to what things are covered and what things are kind of omitted to like kind of look to fill in those gaps would be the way I'd suggest to try to get your feet wet into the games industry biz, covering it.
Very cool. Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to close out with before we end the main topic?
Be sure to keep an eye out for a lot of I have definitely 3 big features that are in the works with IGN. We're doing like an anime week, so I decided to put my Tribly on and decide to think big thoughts about some anime stuff. So keep an eye out for that. And other case for things. I'm not sure what my next things are going to be. So I guess keep an eye on my Twitter whenever I'm not retweeting Kendrick memes or fan art or whatever. There'll be occasional like, hey, I worked on this thing, go read it kind of stuff. So that's about that for me.
All right, well, that's going to do it then for our discussion with Isaiah on gaming journalism. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. I actually haven't been playing much new. We're stuck on the end of Trine, me and my kid, the Enchanted Edition of Trine. So every once in a while we try to do that and fail. And then played some Splatoon 3, of course, and some Smash. I guess the only thing, which is not video game, but it's sort of gaming, is I have started playing a D&D campaign with my wife, my son, and my cousin.
Whoa.
So we actually did our first one was just character creation, but we actually started, and that was a lot of fun, and I think everybody's into it.
Who's DMing?
Me.
Out of that. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
What's Magnus playing as?
He's an elf.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I want to hear all about this.
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't get into it now because I don't know that everybody wants to hear about it. But
after the show.
Side pod.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're recording all this, right?
But that's it for me.
I'll go next. I still just reading a lot. So I finished Winter's Bone and I started Timequake by Kurt Vonnegut, which I did not realize was his last published novel. And it's just very depressing. It's like the ramblings of like a 70-plus-year-old man who feels like he's just waiting to die. And it says so very point blank. It's weird. I'm curious to read how people received it at the time it came out, because looking back on it, man, I'm like, this is kind of like bleak and not very hopeful. So I don't know. I'm curious. Maybe it'll have a turn by the end of the book. But I did start playing Animal Well because we all started talking about it in our Discord and in the Metroidvania section popping off. I have 2 beacons lit. I don't think that's really much of a spoiler. So I'm, a good amount of the way into the game. I love just going to my egg room and just looking at my eggs. I do that pretty frequently. I don't know. It's like every time I get an egg, I'm like, man, I can't wait till I have an entire room filled with eggs. But I'm liking the mystery so far. I'm kind of curious to see what like the post-game mysteries are like, but I don't know how much I will dive into that based on my experience with Tunic and just getting really frustrated with the meta post-game. But anyway, also Summer talking about Hades made me really want to go back and finish out at least the story, because the story, I think you have to beat the game something like 10 times, or at least beat Hades 10 times to get a lot of the full story. And even then you still get more pieces. So I want to kind of finish it out. I think I'd beaten it 4 times and I think I'm at 6 now. And it's just a way to hold off myself from buying Hades 2 and starting that up, because I'm like, okay, if I finish the first one and I feel pretty confident, I'll go on to the second one. But and then other than that playing Hades made me be like, God, I'm done with Balatro for now. I got to go back to Slay the Spire. So I started playing some Slay the Spire runs again to stave off trying to get Slay the Spire 2 beta. So hopefully this will help. But I did finally beat the game as Watcher, which is the 4th character I think that they added. I think it was like the additional character they added after the game came out. And to me, took the longest to like wrap my head around that deck building mechanic for that one in particular. It's all about like changing stances, and different stances mean you take more damage or give more damage, and some will give you more energy as you leave the stance. And it's all about switching, and just a lot of like the final boss. I knew I had a really good deck, and in Slay the Spire, if you quit out before you die, you can restart an entire battle. So I was like, I have probably the best deck I'm going to get. I'm going to bang my head against the wall until I beat this boss, like the final boss. And I did, but it did take me about an hour and probably about 4 to 6 restarts. But yeah, other than that, that's what I've been playing. What about you, David?
Yeah, I've also been playing Animal Well. I rolled credits on Animal Well, which is good. I lit all those beacons. But yeah, no, it's a really fun game. I also want to keep playing, but I'm such an ADHD gamer. I jump back and forth between a lot of stuff. And so we'll see if I actually keep playing it. I don't know that I'm quite as taken with it as I think so many others have been. But I do really enjoy it. And I mean, it's undoubtedly a good game. I think there was quite a hype cycle around that game, for good reason. But I got a little caught up. I got a little lost in the sauce. But don't get me wrong. Really enjoyed my time with that game. Felt really good to roll the credits. And I definitely will be poking my head around that well. Other than that, I did play through Super Mario Land the other day, whenever that dropped. You can beat that game in like 30 minutes, dog. I kind of miss games that you can beat in 30 minutes. It's like Kirby's Adventure as well for Game Boy. Is it Kirby's Adventure? No, Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy. That's another one you can beat in like a half hour. I really like that. So I really love that game. And what a strange little thing. So many things happened in that game, and so many enemies showed up in Super Mario Land and then never showed up ever again. And that's something I really enjoy about that. And then lastly, I had some friends over recently when my sister was in town. Rob, friend of the show, Rob came over, and the three of us played Puzzle Bobble Every Bubble, which is Bust-A-Move is what it was released as in the States back in the 90s, Bust-A-Move 2 or something like that. This is just the newest entry in the Puzzle Bobble series. I mainly put it on as a bit just because I really liked saying Puzzle Bobble Every Bubble over and over and over again and just really annoying my friends. But then, and at first they were like, this game is for babies and I don't want to play a bubble. And then by the end, like we were all like co-oping the story mode and like reading through the the dialogue cutscenes and all this shit. And everybody was really invested. And we ended up playing that game for like an hour and a half. So Puzzle Bobble Every Bubble is a super fun game, especially with friends. I've really enjoyed that one quite a bit. What about you, Isaiah? I know you've talked a little bit about what you've been playing this week. You've been playing anything else?
So I know that I do the thing where I like start playing a game very intensely, but then like stop before I get to a finish line of it. Mm-hmm. So there are like games I'm like in the middle of. Like I've been in the middle of Mass Effect 3 replay through for like the third time, but like I've stopped playing it and started playing it probably 4 times in the better course of like the last 3 years. So like I'm probably gonna get back to that since I had the idea because I was like, oh, I should get a Steam Deck because I could play Mass Effect laying down. That sounds great. So
yeah, we're at that point in adulthood.
Yeah, I know. Bax is already seasoning up. But there's that. I know that I also I reached the point where like I stopped dragging my feet and playing Yakuza Kiwami 2, and now I'm playing Yakuza 3, where it's no longer the cool remastered thing. It's just kind of like you're getting the old jank grime of old RPGs, so get used to that. So I was like, I'm been dragging my feet with that one because I'm just like, man, it's not going from that and like finishing Infinite Wealth to go back to an old Yakuza game. It's like, ooh, oh man, I gotta stick with it because everyone always gives up on 3. And a friend of mine actually, because this game was on sale, called 100% Orange Juice and was like, this game's really good, you should play it. And I was like, this is a really like anime looking game. I was very surprised that my friend was like really into this. So apparently like the game's like a cool like kind of a board game kind of a deal. So that's something I was gonna try out this week to see whether, because it was like free, so I was like, let me, like, there's no harm in like getting it or whatever. So I was like, let me at least see what this is like. And like part of me is like hoping that it's like a Dokapon Kingdom kind of a deal where it's like a party game where you like make like enemies with your friends, like in a Mario Party kind of sense of the word. So I'm hoping it's kind of like that. We'll see. So
yeah, it looks fun. I Googled that as soon as you said it, and the first thing that popped up on Google was save 100% on 100% orange juice. I guess the game is still free.
Awesome. Well, I guess that is going to do it then for this episode. Thank you again so much, Isaiah, for coming on. Oh, really appreciate it. Thanks as well to milkyway.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. Thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online as PDYX.
You can find me online at Boardan.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Isaiah? Where can people find you online?
Oh boy, I made it complicated because my Twitter got taken out, so I had to make a new one. So it's at Shin Isaiah on Twitter. So it's at SHINEYEZEHUHH. Everywhere else is just EYEZEHUHH. So I kept the branding very neutral on that one.
Oh yeah, very good. Make sure you shoot Isaiah a follow and make sure you read those articles. You got some great articles going up all the time. Love to see it. Thanks so much for coming on the show once again. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We got a website, switchheads.com, and we've got our Discord, Facebook group, and a Patreon. We'll have links to all three of those in the description of this episode. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Music or Spotify, please click some of those links and check them out. And consider joining the Discord. We've had some new people joining the Discord. It's such a wonderful community. It's the favorite gaming community online, and I say that completely non-biased. But that's going to do it for this episode on gaming journalism. What a great time. And we're going to be back next week with another banger of an episode. We're going to be talking all about Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door next week. I can't wait for that one, so make sure you don't touch that dial. But otherwise, you guys know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Let's all go back to school, get a degree in journalism, and see where this thing takes us. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, other than that, we love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.